I've recently been able to spend some time playing Planet Zoo, a new Zoo Tycoon-like game which has just had a 2-week beta event. But what is it, and what did I think of it? Get comfortable, you're about to find out. Planet Zoo will get its official full release on November the 5th. The game is developed and published by Frontier Developments, a company based in Cambridge in the UK. In recent times, they've released popular titles such as Elite Dangerous, Planet Coaster, and Jurassic World Evolution. But their history actually goes back 25 years, including work on the Roller Coaster and Zoo Tycoon games. Planet Zoo is exclusive to PC, with no mention of the game ever being ported to consoles. In brief, it's a zoo management simulation with a huge selection of animals from around the world to house and care for. The game was first announced in April 2019 and I was immediately interested. It didn't have to do much to sell itself. Planet Coaster is already well established as an excellent theme park sim. The best parts of Planet Coaster, namely the customization and building toolkit, can be picked up and moved almost seamlessly into a zoo setting. It's then just a case of adding animals with interesting enough AI to capture the imagination. It's rare that I pick up a game before launch for full price, but the only way to access the beta was through the game's deluxe package on Steam at a price of £43. It also comes with a few extra animals, a soundtrack and wallpapers, but the big selling point was the 2-week beta that ran from September into the first week of October. The base game is £35, and unless you're really insistent on having a pygmy hippo, Thompson's gazelle, and a Komodo dragon in your zoo, that's the one I'd recommend now that the beta is over. Planet Zoo has a few different game modes. It has a career mode, where you get your first taste of running a zoo, complete with a helpful tutorial explaining just about everything you need to begin your life as a zoo owner. Although only one career mode level was available in the beta, it looks like there are going to be at least 11 other levels, each with bronze, silver and gold stars to be attained. There's a sandbox mode. This was locked during the beta, although there was a sneaky save file floating around that granted access. It basically gives unlimited currency and access to items and building materials that ordinarily you'd have to research and pay for. This is the option to pick if you just want to create something beautiful without pesky trivialities like money holding you back. Then there's the franchise mode, and to me this felt like their flagship mode, where you create a franchise of zoos set in different biomes across the globe. Surprisingly, it has a bit of an MMO feel to it. That's right, I said MMO, in a Zoo Tycoon-like game. Hear me out. Where this mode differs is that there's an online marketplace. Every animal you buy is from another player. A side note, Frontier was adding animals to the market to address shortages, but every animal you sell is to other players. The currency involved in these trades is called conservation credits. It's separate from the cash dollars you use in the general running of your zoo. Each player is given a small stipend from logging in, a daily if you will. The most efficient way of earning these credits is by breeding animals and selling their offspring. And then there's the grind. So to improve the efficiency, it makes sense to breed a lot of animals to sell. Going through these animals, choosing what to sell, what to keep as breeding stock, and getting the right animals on the market at the right price took up the majority of my time. It reached a stage where it felt as if I was running a factory rather than a zoo. But I don't want to put anyone off. With some fine-tuning, potentially to how fast time moves, and perhaps adjustments to prevent market manipulation, the game mode is solid and highly addictive. As it was at the time though, players with a wealth of conservation credits were able to completely dominate the market, buy low and sell high without even needing to place the animals in their zoo, thus preventing newer players from getting a foot in the door. The feedback was swift and fairly unanimous, and within just a few days Frontier announced an offline franchise mode to be included at launch. Now that we've gone through the game modes, let's take a minute to focus on the game generally. The building tools are pretty much exactly the same as those found in Planet Coaster. They're fairly straightforward, but you can make some fantastic things once you've figured out the best way to use them. There are already many skilled builders bringing their talents across from Planet Coaster, and with the Steam Workshop, if you don't want to build things yourself, you can just use those instead. Similarly, the staff and buildings work in much the same way as they do in Planet Coaster. Mechanics fix things, vendors sell things, janitors clean things, and the UI won't feel unfamiliar. There are of course new additions. The keepers will feed and look after your animals, and the vets will treat them. Guests could have come directly from your Planet Coaster theme park. It's been a while since I played it, but I didn't notice any significant difference other than what they think about, which is now animals rather than rides. One significant feature is the donation box, which can be placed near your habitats. Aside from an entry ticket, food, drink and souvenirs, once again all brought across from Planet Coaster, guests don't really have the money sink of rides. Instead, they will throw money into donation boxes. More appealing animals will draw bigger crowds and therefore more money. So let's talk about the animals, the absolute stars of the show. There are more than 50 expected when the game goes live, from aardvarks to zebras and from elephants to spiders. These are separated into full habitat animals and exhibit animals. The exhibit animals are in terrariums, like beetles, frogs and snakes. Exhibits can be adjusted for temperature and humidity, and extra items can be added like logs or vines, but the placement of these is predetermined. To be honest, I found the exhibit animals to be a little limited. Not being able to design my own terrarium was a bit of a letdown, and it's hopefully something Frontier reworks before the launch. The full habitat animals, on the other hand, were hugely impressive. The animations, while not perfect, really made the animals feel distinct. They were a pleasure to watch and really encouraged me to put effort into my enclosures, far beyond the minimum welfare requirement of each animal. The beta only showcased a limited number of interactions, but Frontier were keen to stress many more would be added for launch, and I'm really looking forward to seeing them come alive. Frontier were also keen to stress that they want the game to have educational value, with a high degree of realism for the animals. In fact, one of the needs of guests is education, which can be provided through information boards and speaker systems. In that vein, they have included long write-ups, facts and stat sheets for every species of animal, life expectancies, gestation periods, social group makeups, average number of offspring, food and drink requirements, habitat size, terrain and temperature preferences. It's all there. It's your job to manage all of it, and I had an enormous amount of fun working all of it out while providing my guests with the best possible views. As I touched on earlier, your animals can take mates, breed and have offspring. Each animal has its own idea of a family group. As a few examples, lions will have one alpha male and lots of females. Males will fight for the right to breed. Indian peafowl are less dependent on a hierarchy, and in a large social group, any male and female will mate. Grizzly bears will only be happy with one male and one female together in the habitat, but will happily breed if you swap the female out for another. Tapirs are monogamous and mate for life. They won't breed as easily if you replace the female from an already established couple. Understanding these social groupings is important, not only for a successful breeding program and therefore a steady supply of conservation credits, but also to avoid conflict in the habitats and injuries to your animals. If you're not on top of this, there's a potential for animals to kill each other. Some species can also cohabit in an enclosure and even benefit from an interspecies habitat. Get this wrong and you're left with dead animals, and guests will start protesting outside your enclosures. If you do get it right, you can start aiming for bigger, stronger, healthier animals that live longer and draw in bigger crowds. Every animal has an appeal rating, which is determined by genetic makeup. This is indicated by a bronze, silver or gold rosette. The chances of more appealing offspring are increased by breeding 2 gold-rated adults. This should be carefully managed, as too much inbreeding will have a negative effect on fertility and immunity, making them more susceptible to disease. So the risk of losing one of your prized animals is not highest from conflict, but from disease, which will require the use of quarantine rooms to keep these animals isolated while they recover. Animal welfare is a top priority. Animals have unique requirements that need to be met, and these are presented as progress bars, which ideally need to be kept as close to 100% as possible. It's a lot to consider, but generally once a habitat is set up for each animal, it's rare that anything needs adjusting drastically. Population growth tends to be the main reason for alterations, which is something to keep in mind when boxing in your enclosures with paths and other habitats. There's a lot going on in Planet Zoo, which is part of the reason I spent nearly 100 hours in the game over the 2-week beta period. Planet Coaster was often criticised for a lack of management, but I think with the unique habitat requirements, breeding programs and trading, Planet Zoo isn't likely to be hit with the same criticism. And that's before taking into account the effect disease will have on the game, which wasn't enabled in the beta. The possibility of a breakout could lead to some tough decisions for the player. I had a lot of fun with the beta, but it wasn't without issues. The breeding adjustment patches in particular often seemed to take a hammer to a problem that could have been solved more delicately. As an example, my ringtail lemur enclosure went from around 20, steadily breeding and maintaining numbers while trading the excess, to not breeding at all and dying out. It wasn't a localized problem with just my zoo. It caused the market to increase prices tenfold or not have any stock at all. The research done by mechanics, while a sound concept, was buggy throughout and only fixed in the final few days. Guests and staff members got stuck or refused to provide food. Animals became trapped on the market. Sometimes they phased through barriers and escaped, or ended up on top of scenery. There were a lot of bugs throughout the 2-week period, but quite a few were actually fixed with patches. A further concern I do have is the passage of time. It moves far too quickly, and although there's an option to pause the game, it doesn't really give you a chance to bond with your animals. Time flows at around 3 years per hour, and that's without speeding time up. For context, many animals live for around 21 years, which would be about 7 hours of game time. In a game as engrossing as this one, 7 hours can fly by. So within a week of real time, the animals you began with will all be long gone. Unless Frontiers slow the passage of time, I'd suggest by a factor of 3, so that 1 hour is a year. There's not going to be a chance to grow a connection with these beautiful animals, and I think that's a shame. The ability to speed up time can remain for those that want to do that, but I feel the minimum speed should definitely be reduced. The game also suffers from performance issues as the zoo increases in size. More animals and guests directly reduce the frame rate, and there's a noticeable latency between clicking an animal and having its stat sheet appear. This is also prevalent in the market, which is an exercise in frustration, and I'd have probably given up on the game if other aspects were not as entertaining as they are. Hopefully this is all resolved for launch, because I'd quite like to build up a full zoo with all the animals, and a noticeable slowdown after just half a dozen enclosures is really disappointing. It should be noted though that I was playing at the highest possible settings in 1080p, and my system falls just a little short of the recommended specifications, so overall performance is solid, and I only experienced a handful of crashes during my time with the game. Loading speeds are reasonable, and after getting into your zoo, you can play for hours without ever needing to see another loading screen. Some people judge a game's value by how many hours they spend in it compared to the price, and by that measure I've already exceeded 2 hours per pound. But I know I'm enjoying a game when I'm waking up early and staying up late without ever really noticing the passage of time. when a week passes and it feels like just a couple of days, and when I'm not playing, I'm using the first few minutes of any break I get to look at the forums, subreddit or Discord. I've really enjoyed my time with Planet Zoo so far, and even though I've highlighted quite a few areas that require improvement, I'm excited for the launch on the 5th of November, and I hope, after watching this video, you decide to check it out too. Thanks for watching.